Welcome to the Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with Brad Pinkerton, and we had a monumental shift, I guess you could say, in the fantasy world last night when Tony Romo broke his clavicle, might be done for the year, probably done 6 weeks minimum. That, of course, at least according to Jerry Jones, who I will point out also did compare the injury to one that Troy Aikman had many, many years ago. But where do you see this injury affecting teams that A, had Tony Romo, and then B, have all those Cowboys supplementary players?
Well, there were a lot of tears shed last night from fantasy owners when Tony went down. But obviously, you can't cut Romo quite yet. I think the latest I saw was 6 to 8 weeks, and we've seen up to 10 weeks. So, I mean, that puts him on the cusp of going into the fantasy playoffs. You have to hang on for now until we hear differently. But obviously, John Kitna's the guy now, and that should make Miles Austin owners the most nervous of all. Feel free to jump on Kitna this week if you're in a dire situation because he gets the Jaguars. That's always good for anybody. I could probably throw for 300 and a couple of touchdowns against them. Kitna showed an affinity for Dez Bryant, and even though that was prevent mode on the Giants' part, it's not the worst thing for Dez Bryant. It is the worst thing for Roy Williams. I think he has not only been surpassed by Bryant, but now he's been forgotten about by Kitna. So Roy is definitely on the way down. Miles is he's on the way down. It's just a matter of how far. And Jason Witten, I think, is holding pretty strong because Kitna will be looking to him quite a bit.
Now, you say that Austin is on his way down. Do you think that he still maintains wide receiver one, start every week status?
He's earned that right. He's the guy. He's basically in Larry Fitzgerald's spot now, where you have to start him, even though you're not very excited about it. And he's going to be boom or bust, and I think there's going to be a lot more bust than boom from here on out.
Okay. Other developments from this past weekend, somehow, some way, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, talking about other quarterbacks, is turning into one of those guys that if you happen to stash him away as maybe a bye-week backup, if you had a lower-end quarterback, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, if the Bills are going to be behind in most games, because they're a terrible team, they're just terrible, I'll take those garbage points because I think we mentioned this back in the preseason. Garbage points are still fantasy points. Now, do you agree with that assessment? Where do you see Ryan Fitzpatrick fitting into the overall scheme of things in fantasy this year right now?
Well, let's look at it from just this week because there are 6 teams on bye weeks, and that includes a lot of mid-tier quarterbacks, even some backup quarterbacks that you were planning on using probably in Week 8. And you got a lot of injuries that are going around. So, Fitzpatrick now is actually a very good option. That hurts to say, but he really is. Multiple touchdowns in all of his starts, including 4 last week, which is amazing. Ride the hot hand. He's getting hot at just the right time for fantasy owners. So don't worry about whether he's for real long term. You can start him right now.
We always talk about looking forward, and there are 2 things that I want to bring up about Ryan Fitzpatrick. First, Week 10 is going to be the fantasy quarterback apocalypse because we've got Rodgers, Breeze, and Rivers are all going to be on bye in Week 10. So, like before the season, we were talking about, okay, who's got the good matchup that weekend? A lot of that's been thrown out the window because Alex Smith, for instance, was my fantasy pick for that. Second thing I want to say is as far as Fitzpatrick, he's got Chan Daly behind him. Mm-hmm. Now, Chan Daly has weird connotations as being the guy who couldn't get Reggie Ball to play well at all at Georgia Tech and destroyed Calvin Johnson's college stats, basically. But he's also the guy. Oh, and also don't forget how his semi-disastrous tenure with the Cowboys. But he's also the guy that turned Tyler Thigpen in Kansas City into a fantasy viable quarterback, and a guy that made people really interested in Tyler Thigpen as a potential NFL quarterback. So I'd say that Chan Daly, the Bills coach, he makes me think about Ryan Fitzpatrick a lot better than I would have previously.
Absolutely, but all those names you mentioned, you have to take this with a grain of salt. It's a flash. If it works, it's going to be a flash in the pan.
Yes.
So get it while it's hot, and Fitzpatrick can help you now. 6 buys this week, 6 next week, and then the big name quarterbacks you mentioned in Week 10. Fitzpatrick might get the answer.
Okay. Anybody else that you see as the hot pickup besides, say, and again, I'm having difficulty saying this, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Well, you have to look at his receivers now. Lee Evans, people probably gave up on him, as well they should have.
I did in the experts.
He's the most frustrating fantasy player, I think, out there right now. Of course, because of that big game, like that 3-touchdown performance this weekend, his final stats are going to look okay, and he's going to trick people next year. But let's worry about right now. Like you said, the Bills are going to have to throw a lot. Steve Johnson has found the end zone in each time the last 4 games. And I mean, who's to say he can't do it again? I'm not looking for 100 yards out of him every week. You're looking at probably 30 to 50 yards. Maybe he gets in the end zone, but hey, that's what you're looking for when you're trying to fill bye-week holes. You're hoping to hit it big.
Yeah, and if you play 3 wide receivers, that's the one where you play the matchup, say, okay, they're going to be throwing a lot, spreading it around. See who the opponent is in that particular week.
But for the record, I am not saying anyone should be starting these Bills offensive options after the bye weeks. Just leave those guys alone.
Yeah, if you're treading water,
right.
Go for it.
Right.
All right, Brad, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks a lot.